What is up, everybody? Welcome back to the framework. As always, I'm here with my good friend Mike McKenzie. What's going on, man?
What's up? What's up?
Happy Tuesday, pal. We're filming a little later than normal. I think we're kind of running into not necessarily scheduling issues, but just kind of life,
Exactly.
kind of hitting just your normal speed bumps, I guess you could say.
We learn to adapt and be flexible as much as we can.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I think there's just this general kind of like fear that almost like drapes over me personally. And I think we're going to kind of get pretty deep into, I don't want to get too deep into like personal lives, but
Yeah.
kind of peek behind the curtain and stuff. And I know this was a big reason for you and I to start this.
Mhm.
So this being like our fifth episode, kind of, I think like now's the best time.
Yeah,
But
man.
so I mentioned like this fear, and you and I were just kind of talking a little bit before I hit record. And like, I just have, this lack of motivation. And coming out of my show in March, and I'd love to get, your opinion. I don't want this to be like a therapy session, but feel free to
No, no, no,
put
no.
your own 2 cents
Disclaimer.
into it. But like just this general fear of like, I competed in March and I didn't love it. And I don't know, like I just didn't love the results. I was very happy with my placings and stuff like that, but like I look at like the pictures afterwards, and there's just like this small window, and I would say it's like a 24-hour window. It's really not long. To where I'm like, okay, if I'm gonna do this again, I'm gonna, there's another show in 3 weeks, and there's a show in 5 weeks from there in the middle of May, and I'm like, let me just keep going. And then another part of you is like, well, am I really going to make any changes physically? Am I really going to bring up my weak points in 3 to 5 weeks? Kind of generalizing your purpose for getting back on stage, or in your case, going, back on the platform, or, however you want to.
No, exactly.
And so I was like, you know what? I'm going to pack it in. Like I talked to my wife and I talked to my family, and, that was a really long prep. I think it was like 17 and a half weeks, give or take. And I was just like, okay, I kind of prepped through the holidays, and
Yeah.
there was only a small break in there, like a diet break, and I'm just like,
Right.
okay, like let me just be present. And I actually think it did more harm than good mentally.
Hmm.
And so like now we're, I don't know, what am I, 8 weeks give or take, post show, seven, whatever.
Already, which is wild.
Yeah, 7 weeks when you're in contest prep, or when you're in prep for a meet, it feels like a lifetime, and then afterwards it's like flies
Time,
by.
time's very quick.
You're like, oh, I got 7 weeks. There's so much time to make adjustments, and then afterwards. But so I think after every show, and I'm not sure if you do the same with your meets, but like I try to like take little things out of each one. A few years ago was my posing. Okay, I'm never gonna get up there and feel like my posing's off. I'm just gonna hit everything, and I'm gonna feel comfortable up there. And this one was definitely like the structure. Like no matter what, I'm going to continue to eat my meals at this time, and I'm going to go on 40-minute walks every morning, and I'm still going to do cardio 3 days a week. Like I just wanted to maintain that. Like I'm going to hit 200 pounds again, but I'm not going to be a sloppy 200 pounds where I got to eat a cheat meal every day. And, you know, so came out of that show, wanted to get back into like normal life and be present for Lex and I. And, obviously our son's on the way. So there's doctor's appointments and stuff like that I want to be at, and not
Yeah.
have to worry about, oh yeah, we're going to be 5 minutes late because I got to get this meal in, or eating in the car, whatever the case may be. Connor, my brother lives with us. So like I want to do things with him. I want to train with him, and even like traveling for family things. I know I'm rambling at this point. I'm gonna reel it back in, but there was just so much that I missed and that we miss when you're doing these contest preps. I mean, I know that you see Luna X amount of times a week, and the last thing you want to do is her to come to you and be like, "Hey, I need 2 hours, even though you just got here, because I got to go train because I'm 5 6 weeks out from a meet, and I have
Dude,
to hit these numbers this week." And I know that you've run into it. We've had those conversations, and
all the
and
time. All the time.
and
It's hard,
yeah, man, it
Um,
gets. Go ahead. I'm sorry.
no, no, you're good. And kind of piggybacking off of that, like, the cool thing I will say first and foremost about training is like any life experience, I feel like most people take those hard training hardships for granted. Like not that feeling like post contest blues or conflicting emotions is ever a fun thing, but like those experiences, how you mentioned, like taking different things away from it, bleed into so many different areas in life in a good way. Like you learn to take those experiences in life and pull things and build different versions of yourself and kind of level up yourself a little bit. Um, and I think that's where, like, when you leave a contest prep, that it's so challenging because you have that carrot in front of you every single day, no matter what. Whether it's a hard day, whether it's an easy day, or especially during the hard days, if you wake up feeling like shit, you're like, okay, I have this goal. I'm going to do it no matter what. And then the meet's over or the show's over or said end goal is over. And then a lot of times I know I struggle with it. I don't know if this is what you're getting at with yourself, or I find that most people struggle with like that transient experience of having to transition to whether it's a new goal or embracing the fact that it's a season of life with no goal, which
Yeah, like
happens.
what's my purpose now?
Yeah, which happens, and it's hard because when you're a goal-oriented person and you focus so much on that, which rightfully so, it's hard to go through those seasons of life and keep yourself going, especially during the hard days, And I think that is kind of the question. It's like how do you continue rolling with those punches during those challenging times? And I think it's a matter of looking at a lot of things internally, and reflecting, like the past experience. How was this prep? How was this said life experience? And using those moments on how to grow. And I think that's a good time during those seasons of no goal is doing that internal growth, like how you mentioned, like the structure of this last prep or posing a previous prep. It's like, okay, I'm able to now take a chance to kind of look at and smell the rain, smell the flowers, whatever the
Yeah.
saying, and being able to actually do that because when the next goal starts, I know how we both are. You have you have your wife, you have your son coming up. With me, I have Luna, I have my girlfriend, and like you have those things, and then you have your training, and like that's it. But then when you don't have that goal, you're able to take that extra step and focus on all those things of growth. And I think that's the good time because it's a challenge. So, but the personal growth is what I feel like can be the next transient goal, if that makes sense.
Yeah, speaking of like just the word fear and like, falling in, like there's a fear of
Yeah,
coming out of these shows, and I guess fear of resentment is one of like the first things that come to mind because
sure.
like Lex and I aren't really able to spend that much time together during the week. Just, that's how our work schedules are and stuff like that. And so like you have this fear of like, okay, like I'm gonna sit down my family or my significant other or the people who have missed me, through this, this 12, 14, 20 week time frame where I was very selfish and I was kind of engulfed in it. And I don't think there's a regret there at all. I love doing those contest preps, and I know that you love getting prepared for meets and stuff. But there's a fear, an internal fear of, man, if I don't do this, like I'm gonna blame myself and I'm gonna blame the people around me unfairly.
Yep.
And you don't mean to, but it's just like not that I could ever imagine you being like, oh my God, like I have Luna on Wednesday and like Wednesday's my busiest day. Like I have to do this, this, and that, and I have to train and like, oh man, like I could never imagine that being the case. However, I'm sure there are times as a human being when you're like, man, if I could just not have this responsibility for 2 more hours,
Yeah, man.
and I could, fucking train and prep my food and not have to worry about what time Emily's coming home, or if I didn't see her yesterday, having to see her today. And I know because we all run into it.
Hmm.
This fear of like, it's not your fault, but I just can't help but channel that feeling towards the people around me.
Yeah.
And I know it's not fair, but I think
No,
we're all guilty of it.
it's that stress of like shouldering that burden that you shouldn't be shouldering, and that stress just inadvertently has to pour somewhere, you know, and I feel like the first natural response is to blame the other variables rather than yourself at times per se, like it's easy for us to default, especially when we're
Yeah.
high stress, to focus on the other reasons of why we're stressed instead of compartmentalizing and figuring out how to manage that stress. Like I definitely deal with it, like you had said, like having, working 9, 10 hours, coming home and like having Luna at home, the last thing I want to do is train, because then that takes time away from her. And then the double-edged sword of that, like, okay, so I'll train normally at like 5 or 5:30 in the morning, and then at work, and then it's still trying to fit in all the other parts of the day. So it's like instead of compartmentalizing and figuring out how to pull audibles and change my week, you get stressed out and it starts pouring into all other aspects. And I think that kind of goes back to the internalizing, kind of like that self-reflection, like, okay, why am I defaulting to this? Why am I feeling this?
Yeah.
Like what can I change? What can't I change? And being okay with what I can't change. Because let's be honest, a lot of the external stresses that we have, we can't change. You know, you can't change what's going on in the world. You can't change, if you have, to work today. You can, but but at the same time,
Ideal.
exactly, what I mean? So, like, I think it's being okay with the things you can't control and kind of managing yourself in the process. And I think for me, at least, you may have a different experience with fear, but for me, like lately, I find it like it's the fear of the things I can't change. And that's what's kind of forced me to have to really learn how to manage my emotions because that fear of not being able to change certain things causes me to default into those situations where I'm blaming others.
And I think, that leads us into a good point. I mean, we discuss, kind of the family factor,
Yeah.
this fear of resenting the people around us and resenting those variables that we can't control.
Mhm.
But at the same time, to kind of give, the viewers that there are pros to having,
Of course,
you
of
know,
course.
uh, I think, having somebody who may not understand or may not live that lifestyle can be a pro in the sense of there are days, obviously Lex is 7 months pregnant, but there are days where I'm able to now, not in contest prep, train with her
Mhm.
where I don't have to worry about my intensity level being super high, or I can throw a random arm day in because it's something that she can train. Obviously, I'm not going to put 225 on Lex's shoulders and make her squat till failure. And it gives me the opportunity to, what, I can move my off day around because we're gonna go get ice cream, or we're gonna walk
Yeah,
the dogs, and I'm gonna push my meal back. So I think for like the viewers, it's okay to do that.
yeah.
It's okay to cut out 16 to 18 weeks of your life to say, hey, I need this for me. I need this structure. I need to reel it in. My diet's off, my training's off, my mindset isn't there. And having your family understand that is a huge plus. The people closest to you should and will, for the most part, understand that. And then making the time when you're not doing that, when you're not in a contest prep or right after the show, being able to spend that additional time with your family and your friends is the light at the end of the tunnel. It is, we had said, this fear of not knowing what's next, or this feeling of not having that light at the end of the tunnel or that goal. That is the goal. Now I have that freedom. I know you and I are super anal about still being on top of your meals and the training every day, and sticking to a strict off season, and or off days, and
Yeah.
so forth. And we are lucky enough to have the people around us who understand that. But there are ways of balancing that.
Mhm.
And I think, finding, being able to have that open communication with the people around you and say, like, hey, there's this show or there's this meet 20 weeks from now. That's another thing too. I'm gonna come off in a minute, but these people that I've seen are like, oh yeah, I'm by the way, I've just been in contest prep.
Yeah.
Or to, go to your significant other, guys and girls, and be like, you know, oh yeah, by the way, I'm 18 weeks out from a show. Like when you have family, like they have to be involved. I mean, these are very individual sports in the sense of when you're on that stage or you're on that platform, it's you against you.
Team.
But knowing like, hey, I'm going to do a little bit extra these next 2 to 3 weeks because this is what's coming.
Yep.
Do you ever find yourself kind of like,
Yeah.
not that you're ever not, going above and beyond, for family. Do you ever notice like, hey, these next 2 to 3 weeks leading up to meet time,
Yeah.
I'm going to kind of be open?
No, and I think communication is the big aspect, kind of like you mentioned on that, and having the conversation and being able to talk about it of what it is, like instead of just being. But first off, first and foremost, kind of going back to what you said, definitely shout out to like having the significant others and all that stuff. I would
Yeah.
definitely not be where I was without my girlfriend or my daughter or anything like that. It's definitely normal to have those feelings that we're
Yeah.
talking
Oh
about.
yeah. Yeah.
And
Fuck yeah.
I know you're not saying it's not, but I like to just kind of always express that like it's only natural, you know. But now kind of forwarding back to what you said, I think having the conversation with like significant others and whatnot about things that you're doing, like with you with bodybuilding or like with powerlifting or like with coaching or like whatever aspect it has to be. These are the things that make me a better person. And when I was able, since we're talking about me, like able to flip the script of myself with taking that time to train, like knowing that like, hey, if I take this hour and a half to 2 hours to train, I'm a better boyfriend, I'm a better father, I'm a better employee, I'm a better self. And when you understand that taking that time for yourself is so important, because a lot of people, when they're in these situations with families and careers and whatnot, they put themselves last, you know. And don't get me wrong, there's a time and a place when you're providing for your family that they go before you, but like also understanding that these times are so important for yourself. And I've had to definitely do that, whether it's, I'm lucky enough to have a girlfriend who's involved with my industry. So it's very easy to have the conversations with her. But even like when I talk to Luna, my daughter's 8 years old and I have conversations with her like, hey, I have this hour or 2 hours to myself. And that's going to allow me to be more present with all of my time with you. And I think having those conversations is super important
Yeah. Okay.
because when you're doing yourself a disservice and not focusing on yourself, that's when you start having those resentments we talked about in the beginning of this, where then you start blaming others. I can't do me because of my significant other or my child or my job. And then that's when it starts spiraling. And it all again flips around to me with myself. It tends to be internalizing in a lot of those seasons between meets or between goals. When I do that self reflection, is where I'm able to kind of grow into having this mindset. If that makes
Yeah,
sense.
no, you're spot on, and I think there's going to be hardcores out there that look at this and be
Yeah.
like, oh, if your family gets it, then you should be all in 100%. And I mean, you and I are living proof of, yeah, we've been all in, and
Mhm.
we've had to get up at 5 in the morning, because if that's the time we can train, so that we do have that balance. We're all in the sense of I'm hitting my meals, I'm hitting my cardio, I'm able to train, I'm doing all this stuff, but I'm making the time.
Yes.
My family's not allowing me to go do this. We're not saying that,
Mhm.
but if I know my wife is going to be home at 2 o'clock instead of 7 o'clock, where we, only get 2, 3 hours a day together, I'm going to train early in the morning so that I can have that time.
Exactly.
Again, it carries into when it does come time for contest prep, there is that conversation of, hey, I've really kind of been here, here, and here. I haven't missed this. I haven't missed that. I really need this. And it's kind of like relationship currency, where it's like, hey, I'm cashing in now because I've done all this extra stuff, and I did the vacations and the dinners
Yeah.
and all this stuff. So yeah, I think that there's just this level of, you're coming out of a contest prep or whatever it is, and maybe you're not satisfied, or maybe you did so well that you want to keep going, and you almost fall into like this depression
Yep.
of like, did I do enough? Did I place as well as I wanted to? Did I hit the numbers that I was planning on hitting? And I think it just like, if you're not doing it, it
Mhm.
just hangs over you.
Yep. No, I agree. And I know for me, something that's helped with that is understanding also simultaneously, like if I'm having this selfless goal and it's always going to sacrifice some time with
Of
that significant
course.
other, no matter what. Because realistically, even if I'm training 2 hours at 5 o'clock in the morning, that's, 2 extra hours. You could be, laying next to your wife and your future child, and vice versa with me. So like I always try to make sure if I'm gonna take this time that's sacrificed away from my family, I better make damn sure that I'm capitalizing on it. And I feel like if you're not putting the extra time in your cardio, or prepping your meals and staying on top of your training and your programming and all those things, and you're slacking, then you're almost slapping them in the face. It's a brutal way for me to look at it sometimes, where I'm like, wow, I'm screwing over everybody if I slack. And
Yeah,
I feel like for me, when I've
100%.
when I've had that outlook lately, I'm able to. You're still gonna have post contest blues regardless. That's just your mind's way of transitioning to a new goal.
Yeah,
But you're able, when you look back at like, did I train hard enough? Did I accomplish what I set out to? Regardless of the outcome, things are subjective. But when you look at what you put in, you better be able to say, I crossed off every T and dotted every I, because then you're almost doing everybody else who supported that goal while you sacrifice that time like a disservice. So that has helped me with that part of it. But
it's awesome, dude. I couldn't agree more. That was perfect. I couldn't have explained it any better. If as we wrap up this episode, and I feel like unintentionally it kind of turned into like the blame game, and I didn't want that to be the case. Is like
not at all. That's why I know we both
who you
clarify.
point the finger at when things don't go your way. That wasn't kind of the intention, but if you were to give advice to yourself, whether it be to a past prep, or specifically, if you want to, give specifics, give years or situations. If you were to, give advice to yourself for the past or future Mike who's going to get into a competition, and you're kind of worried about the balance, you're worried about the results themselves, you're worried about the aftermath, like what advice would you give to yourself?
I'll definitely speak on the balance side of it, and that's not being afraid to bend in a way. And what I mean by that metaphorically is not being afraid to have to call audibles when life happens and not feel as structured. And what a reason I always emphasize that is because there's so many times where, especially when my daughter was younger, where things happen. She's sick, there's no childcare and whatnot. I would have to train and I would have to sacrifice the time with her, or I would resent everybody. And you're getting in the way of my goals. It's being able to understand that, like, you have to bend sometimes, to be flexible with life and don't take it personal. And also just learning to embrace the process. Everything's a learning experience. It's a lot of life situations have kind of forced me to have that outlook. Just being able to take every situation and learn from it. So like I said, learning how to bend, not breaking, but being able to bend and mold to the life situation, and being able to take something from every situation, every prep, every training session, every bad day, and realizing that there are no bad days. It's just data on how to, handle situations differently next time. I feel like
Yeah,
that's one example.
again, no, dude, again, that you hit the nail on the head. If I were to give myself,
Yeah.
past or future self, going into or coming out of a prep, and I had to pick, one thing to say, like, hey, this is going to happen, and here's how you deal with it. It would be, maintain structure coming out of the show. Don't be afraid of the results. Don't be afraid of the good days and bad days, because they're going to come. Like you said, when you come out of it, have a new goal, have a new purpose, to where you still have that balance in life, but
Mhm.
you're still going to keep the logbooks. You're still going to track your training. You're still going to pay attention to your meals. You're not going to overdo it, because that's when you're going to get so far off your plan that 5, 6, 7 weeks post show, you're going to hate yourself.
Comes like a freight train.
Yeah, because your sleep's off, or the scale isn't where you thought it was supposed to be. Your logbook looks the same as it did 3 weeks out from your show. So again, one tip of advice I give to my future self is maintain structure and don't fall off.
Agreed. I like it.
Right. All right, man. This was an awesome, awesome episode. I'm excited to share it. I'm gonna get it out tonight. And I'm gonna watch it back probably 10 times because I'm gonna hear things in here that I need to hear over and over again. So
Likewise.
as always, thank you everybody for stopping by the framework. Mike, thank you for another awesome episode on Tuesdays. And
Of course.
thank you everybody for watching. Leave some comments and stuff below. Let us know or some things that you may be struggling with, during contest prep, heading into what scares you about even starting prep for those who are afraid to get going. Let us know. Mike and I are always available and excited to talk about it. So again,
Yeah.
thank you all for stopping by the framework.
See you next week.